Welcome to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm John Dykes, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Alan Morrison, who runs the Celtic by Numbers blog. Welcome to A Celtic State of Mind again, Alan.
Yes, thanks, Paul. Looking forward to it, as always.
Yes, we were chatting regularly. It was yourself and Kevin Graham, but obviously life, business and global pandemics have taken their toll. We've not heard from you for a wee while, so we can stick to the football today and talk stats, because that's what you do. You do the numbers, you look at the analytics, and it always throws up something interesting. I'm going to give you my view, and then you can disprove me with the facts rather than my casual observations. What I want to look at, and it's difficult to plan anything at the moment, never mind football, but the two players that Celtic have had in on loan this season, and who I feel, as I say, as a casual spectator, have made a big impact. We're going to have a look at Fraser Forster and Mo Elyounoussi, and you can give us an insight into how they've actually performed, and we can take it from there, because I think I mentioned in one of the previous podcasts in the last week or so, I would be happy if we kept Edouard and we signed these two guys either on extended loan deals or perhaps even on a permanent deal in the case of Forster. But you might prove that wrong. Let's start off with the big man, Fraser Forster, the La Gran Muralla, who is now enjoying his fourth spell at Celtic Football Club. And at that time when we signed him, when Neil Lennon signed him, I'm pretty sure Craig Gordon and Scott Bairn were looking at each other thinking, do we need another goalkeeper? So do you think we did? Yeah,
it was an interesting one, and I did something on that at the time. I was delighted to see Forster back. I do think he's the best keeper I've seen in my Celtic supporting life. So that was great news for me. But I did feel a little bit for Bain. I think Bain took over from Gordon. It was after the winter break, 2019. Gordon hadn't done a lot wrong, but I think the view was perhaps that Rodgers wasn't happy with his distribution, especially. Now that might seem an odd thing, goalkeepers there to keep the ball out of the net, you might think. But if you look at just, for example, Forster this year, Forster averages only about 2.2 saves per game, but he's going to be distributing the ball about between 20 and 30 times a game. So actually, having a goalkeeper that distributes the ball can have quite a big impact on the game. And if you think a reasonably competent goalkeeper would save most shots, then there's actually some merit in that thinking. So I think that led to sort of Gordon's demise, and Bain really did take his chance last year. I mean, he had a quite incredible 85% of shots on target he saved, but more importantly than that stat is the fact that he saved more of the shots he saved more shots than he'd be expected to do. So what I mean by that is, this is for me the most important goalkeeping stat that there is, which is if you look at the shots on target, and look at the expected goals of them, how many goals should they have let in versus how many goals did they actually let in? And what we saw by the end of last season was that Gordon actually was letting in more goals than the quality of the shots suggested he should do. Right. And Bain was quite spectacular, conceding less goals than what the shots on target you'd expect. So I think you're right when you say they probably looked at each other and thought, why are we getting another goalkeeper? I'd been told by somebody that reasonably well placed, I think, who said to me that Lennon perhaps didn't fancy Bain and therefore he was looking at another goalkeeper. And what was noticeable at the beginning of this season was that Bain's form did definitely drop. And I did wonder, and this is just me, wondering off the top of my head, whether Bain, knowing he was under pressure or perhaps sensing that the manager didn't fancy him, perhaps led his confidence to drop, which I think on a human level is a shame and is that great man management. But on the other hand, in the tough world of professional football, if the pressure's on, you probably need to step up and not crumble, your form not crumble. So either which way, whether it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, when Forster came in, I think it's fair to say his form has been excellent throughout the season, and the numbers actually do back that up. If you compare Bain and Gordon to last season, with Forster this season, then he saved expected goals saved per 90 minutes. That's basically saying, how many shots on target, what's the total value of goals you expect from those that you're keeping out of the net. Forster is keeping basically the ball out of the net with better quality shots than Bain and Gordon were. It's as simple as that. And that, as I say, that's one. It's almost like a sort of silver bullet stat for goalkeepers. I think that tells you quite a lot. So essentially, Forster has done a great job. What was also evident is that his distribution is far less accurate than Bain's and Gordon's.
Right.
So whereas by moving from Gordon to Bain, your pass percentage went up from 78 to 86. Mm-hmm. Under Forster, you're going back down to 68% again. But I suspect Lennon simply doesn't care. There's probably two things there. One, he doesn't care, and two, he's quite happy for Forster to go direct at times, whereas Bain and Gordon were under instruction to play out from the back at all times. Mm-hmm. So that's just a minor thing, but really, the big ticket news is that Forster has justified his inclusion. I think Bain's been unlucky. So and finally on Forster, really for me is that, and I think that the big thing is where he's really turned it on and really performed has been in the big games.
Yeah.
If you look at the averages, I think I said earlier, he only averages 2.2 saves per game, which you might surprise people, but obviously Celtic are a dominant team domestically.
Uh-huh.
Sides don't tend to have a lot of shots against them, so 2.2 is probably not that unexpected, but that's across the season. But in the games where he's made a lot of saves, he made 5 and 6 against Lazio. He made 7 saves against Rennes. He made 8 in the League Cup final, including a penalty. And he made 4, don't forget, in the Scottish Cup. That's that horrible, scrappy 1-0 win against St Johnstone away to keep the cup run going. He made 4 saves in that game as well. So if you look at all those games, those big matches, these must-win games that Celtic were successful in, he made a lot of saves. He would have been expected to concede about 8.6 goals based on the expected goals, but he actually only conceded 3. So that tells you that in the big games he stood up, and that's what Celtic need. We need a keeper who's competent to stand around on a Saturday afternoon against Hamilton and with nothing to do and perform well, and he does that. And we need somebody to go to Rome and get pelted with shots here, left, right and centre, and to stand up and perform well, and he does that too. And that's exactly what you need from a Celtic goalkeeper.
I mean, that's impressive. It's impressive. But when you're going through the games, and I'm recalling back Lazio, League Cup final, St Johnstone, he has been the man who has ensured that we, in particular the League Cup final, that we got the win. And I think one question that can't really be measured on numbers or statistics, Alan, if you're a centre-half with that man mountain behind you, you're going to feel a wee bit more confident as well. If you're a centre-half and you've got Forster behind you, do you think that comes into the psychology of a defender as well?
It must do. I mean, he's quite a calm player. That must help. He's a big guy. And the fact that he's got a history of performing well in the big games, he's quite experienced. He's in his 30s now. He's been around the England squad. He's not a rookie by any means. He knows what he's doing. He's a seasoned professional. I was just thinking as I was that the other person who's also performed well in all those big games is Julian in front of him, and I think the two of them, that spine at the back has been incredibly important for Celtic this season.
Mm-hmm. And again, it kind of feeds off each other. I'm pretty sure the defender growing in confidence with the big man behind him, pulling off the saves and marshalling the defence as well. I just think when a corner's about to come in and you see the giant arms up in the air, you think to yourself, the big man's organising his defence. Again, one of the things I noticed as a casual observer was in his first couple of spells, his distribution was what I would have considered poor a lot of the time. And you did see him coming out, Alan, and working with Stevie Woods even at half-time on the passing side of the game. But you're saying there that Neil Lennon doesn't seem all that concerned if quite a few of them are going astray. Because again, do you think it's one of the things that Celtic are capable of winning the ball back? So let's not look too deep into that. Yeah,
there's that. But there's also teams, I think, especially under Rodgers, where I think it got a bit predictable in terms of the playing out from the back. If they're going to press high, then the goalkeeper's got to go longer. I don't think Foster's by any means the worst kicker. I mean, he's watching the game back, the St Mirren game, the last game that they played. that the lad that they had in goal, Hadke, is a really, really good shot stopper. I mean, he pulled off a number of impressive saves and he's highly rated, but his kicking was genuinely awful and put them into trouble a few times. Foster's not like that. I mean, he might not be terribly accurate, but he bangs it a long way, so it doesn't put the team into trouble so much. So I think it's a stylistic thing, but also teams do tend to sometimes press up high on Celtic because they know that even under Lennon they will play out from the back if they can. That it does force them long. There's quite a few games where, especially from set plays, that they're having to. He's having his accuracy from those in particular from goal kicks is particularly poor. So. Yeah, I don't think it's an issue for Lennon. Frankly, it's not the most important thing in the world. I think that having someone who's going to stand up, because Celtic, as you know, it's difficult for a player to be playing against a sort of a team in front of a few thousand people on a Saturday who are almost like nearly part time, and then having to stand up and deliver against some of the best teams in Europe on a Thursday or Wednesday. So. For Lennon, I suspect it's that mentality that's more important.
I look at the three goalkeepers we have, and it's a situation that we're in at the moment where all three of them, you've got two Scottish internationalists there and Forster, who has been capped a number of times now by England. So we're well covered between the sticks. But Craig Gordon must be thinking, after his miraculous recovery and comeback, his resurrection, having been out for so long, and his resurrection under Ronnie Deila, it looked as though when Rodgers came in, they didn't fancy him, probably due to the distribution, and he brought in Doris de Vries. That didn't work out. Then he gets back in the team and again loses his spot. Do you think Gordon is now the third choice, Alan? And over the summer months, Gordon may have an eye elsewhere. I mean, he signed a new contract when Chelsea were interested in him. I think Rodgers was keen to keep him, so he's obviously a high earner now. Would it be the time for the player and for the club for Gordon to move on, despite the fact that if you're looking at a player being a backup, Craig Gordon's a fantastic backup, but I don't think he'd fancy that himself. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think, what is he now, 36? He's probably still got a couple of good years in him. He's a fit, leading lad, Gordon. And although his performances for Celtic were definitely, the numbers showed he was regressing, he's going to do a good job at a decent level for somebody, no doubt about it. Around about the end of January, he had been the sub-goalie pretty much, and he had played in a couple of games. He played in the League Cup against Partick. He played away in Cluj in that sort of dead rubber.
Yeah.
And then he was sub, and then suddenly, end of January, Bain was sub. Now, I don't know if Gordon got an injury. I do try and track these things because I track the injuries quite closely. It's one of the key things I like to look at is sort of injury trends. And I didn't hear that he was injured, and I did wonder if that was is this the end for him? But then the last two games that we played at Livingston and St Mirren, he was back on the bench as the backup sub. So I don't know. I guess that's what I'm saying really. But I would be surprised if he wants to be certainly number two. But I suppose if you were Gordon and you've got no idea whether Foster's going to be there or not next season, you've still got a chance of being Celtic's number one goalie next season. So I don't think you'd make any rash decisions at this stage.
It's a good situation to be in, as I say, to have three goalkeepers of such quality. Personally, I agree with yourself. Forster is our number one. I don't think Bain or Gordon would be number three. They wouldn't want to be the third choice. So we might go into the new season having lost one of those guys, and then your only backup after that is a youngster coming through from the development or the underage teams. So Forster, and in terms of keeping Fraser Forster, is that something that we can't really speculate on because of everything else that's going on at the moment, Alan?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we don't know what the state of play is going to be as regards player transfers, budget, ability to pay wages, players locked into contracts, and clubs' ability to pay them on a long-term basis. But none of us know what state football is going to be in the months ahead, really. So, just all I can really opine on that is all things being equal as they are today. And my understanding is that at a personal level, Foster's really happy at Celtic. He wants to be here. He gets on very well with Steve Reeves. He sees him as his sort of mentor. But professionally, he's in a very happy environment. Again, he's been in the English Premier League. He's been in and around the England squad. He's the type of character, I believe, who wants to be happy within himself, at a human level and about his work, and who doesn't. But footballers are also can be very ambitious. I'm not saying he's not ambitious. I think what I'm saying is what's important to him is to be in a happy environment where he feels valued and so forth. I think Celtic gives him that. So, long story short, my understanding is he wants to stay, but actually getting that done in terms of transfers and salary and what have you, God knows where we'll be in the months ahead on that one. But if the club wants him and he wants to be here, and Southampton feel they don't need him, I'm sure they'll find a way to make it happen.
It is difficult actually at the moment, Alan, and I had a really interesting discussion with David Lowe just the other night about the financial aspect and the impact. And it's so difficult to even focus on who's going to be signing, etc. But obviously this kind of thing is going on in the background. Neil Lennon still has to focus on the future. I was probably sounding like the prophet of doom when I was talking about what Scottish football is going to look like. But really, in the worst case scenario, any business without income for 3+ months is going to struggle. They're going to struggle to survive. And then afterwards, even if they go into administration, and I'm not talking about Celtic in this particular example, but if a club goes into administration, it's the coming out of administration that will be an issue, because the investment from any business person is going to be hard to come by, and that is going to be the biggest issue. Points deductions, etc., and the league punishment is going to be the least of their worries. Coming back out of a situation, you've got to get a CVA agreed, and for example, if someone was due me even 10 grand, 20 grand under the current financial situation, you wouldn't take a penny in the pound, would you? So it's going to be a lot harder for clubs to plan. But I mean, it's quite fanciful, I guess, for you and I to be talking about transfers and who we're going to keep, etc. But it's one of these things that Neil Lennon will be considering at this moment in time. It may be a wee bit further down his priority list, but we need to have a look at that. And I mean, with regards to contracts as well, there's going to be a situation perhaps where some players are in limbo and the deal might not get done until we find out what the setup's going to be, what the league is going to be constructed like, and who we're going to be playing next season. So it is a tough one, but if we were able to put that to the back of our minds for a moment or two, which I think this podcast is all about really in the next few weeks, then Forster would certainly be one of the priorities to get him signed, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right of what you say. I mean, again, I'm just speculating because none of us know how this is going to play out. But if you think that, let's take a punt and say that the football business is going to contract, right? That's probably not a controversial statement to say that. It's got to, like you say, businesses all over the place, sponsorship money, people's disposable income to even invest and follow football is going to contract, and you're going to have players that are sitting on existing contracts like Forster at Southampton on whatever, I don't know, 60, 70 grand a week he's on. Mm-hmm. Celtic's ability to pay even half that may be severely restricted. Whereas the ceiling 6 months ago, the ceiling at Celtic might have been, I don't know, 30, 40 grand a week. Yeah. Ceiling after all this is over might be something very different to that. And is a player going to leave a contract at a club, even if he wants to, and he wants to come to Celtic, is he going to leave 70 grand a week to maybe pick up 15, 20 grand a week, because that's all that can be afforded in the new reality? I don't know. But I'm just speculating, as we all are, but there definitely could be complications ahead in that respect, but I'm sure there will be.
Yeah, and this is the true impact on a football level of how business is going to be affected come the 2020-21 season, whenever that may resume. Who knows? And let's hope it's nearer the 3 months this continues than the 6 months that we've heard in some media reports as well, Alan. So that's us got the number one, I think. We've got the number one covered. The other Southampton loanee is a player I've been hugely impressed by, and again, that's me just as a spectator looking at probably the high points of each game and them sticking in my mind rather than looking at the actual stats. And it's Mohamed Elyounoussi. Now, Elyounoussi obviously comes with a large reputation. He comes from good stock. He's been a massive purchase for Southampton, went off the boil somewhat. Otherwise, he wouldn't be up here playing for Celtic, obviously, when you're at the level of a £16 million player. His goal-scoring record previous to Southampton had been very impressive. And then he's come into Celtic, and as I say, I've been very impressed with him. What do you make of his performance over the last few months? Because, he's not been here for the whole season, but what do you make of Elyounoussi?
Yeah, so we try to stand back and look at his time at Celtic, at the most basic level, 7 goals, 6 assists and 20 appearances. But actually, if you look at the minutes that he's played about the equivalent of sort of 15 matches, really, in terms of minutes. And so, 13 goals and assists and 15 equivalent 90 minutes, that's pretty decent. Actually, he would be behind Forrest, Johnson, surprisingly, Christie, Griffiths and Edouard. So, that's not too bad. I don't think it's absolutely outstanding, but it's pretty good. Mm-hmm. But really, if we're going to evaluate him, we're really talking about a period between mid-September and mid-November when he got injured, because that's when he played. He had 12 appearances then, where he was pretty much first choice. He then got injured in mid-November, and although he's appeared a few times since, it's been a bit more bit part and no real sort of momentum for him. And actually, just before he got injured, he was really starting, I think, to look like he'd hit his form. But he was, he was actually the best player if I had him as my Celtic by numbers boy of the match, as I laughingly call it. In the debacle at Livingston, he was the one that put in the best shift there. But really, his semi-final performance against Hibs, again, he was my boy of the match on that one. He really did catch the eye. But also, shortly after against Lazio away in Rome, when he played a bit of a support striker role to Edouard. Although Celtic was set up in what was then their usual sort of 4-2-3-1 type formation, out of possession, and this is a trait under Lennon, out of possession, they were more of a 4-4-2, and Edouard would fill in. Because his work rate in terms of his speed, aggression, and pressing the ball is very impressive, actually. And we'll come to that in a bit. So what I've done really is in thinking about Elyounoussi and assessing him, and it's really, again, it's over quite short. We're really judging him on 2 months as to whether we want to, we want to keep him. Yeah. I've taken his data and I've sort of compared him to Sinclair from last season. So we all know that Sinclair last season isn't what we call vintage Sinclair. But essentially, Elyounoussi was replacing that version of Sinclair. So how does he stack up against the man that he replaced? And then how does he stack up against Forrest on the other side, who largely does a similar job? Now, Elyounoussi has put in shifts as a second striker, but predominantly he's been the left side of a three in a sort of 4-2-3-1. And Forrest generally plays the same, although a lot of Forrest data this season, remember, has been as a wing back actually as well. So in the sort of 3-5-2 formation, but generally I would say they're peers in terms of attacking wide forward. So I kind of I've done a bit of a comparison on them across a number of criteria. So that was how I was going to approach that, Paul.
So that's how you're approaching the Elyounoussi, and with the comparison to the Sinclair, obviously not in the same kind of bracket as the invincible Sinclair that we all fell in love with and wrote a song about him. And for me, it was quite sad actually to see Sinclair leaving and then saying that he wasn't sure why he was left out, etc. Well, he just wasn't performing to the same level, was he? Really, Alan? I mean, you could look at your stats and that would be clear, I think.
Yeah, there's a number of themes that in my analysis that I keep having to be sort of forced to come back to. One of them is Scott Brown, one of them is corners, and another one is Sinclair over the piece. And I was quite pleased in the middle of last season, up to Christmas actually, where I was kind of basically disproving, I intended to anyway, try and disprove those that were being negative about Sinclair. They're saying, look, actually his underlying numbers are not that bad. He's actually more of a goal threat. He's not creating as much, but he was more of a goal threat. But then I can't deny that from sort of, Christmas onwards last year, 2019, the second part of the last season, there's no doubt that his form did dip. And then Lennon coming in, I just don't think he's a Lennon type of player. I think Elyounoussi style is more sort of hard-working, on the eye, bustling type of style. Is more in keeping with the style of player that I think Lennon likes. So, but if you look at the numbers again, if you look at sort of creativity, essentially these guys are are wide players. They're there to create. And there's no doubt that Forrest is the top creator amongst that group. The thing about Forrest, which is in stark contrast to Elyounoussi, is I think one of the reasons Forrest gets criticism is Forrest's actually quite careful in the sense of he doesn't put a lot of risk into his passing, but his creative decisions are very good. I mean, he's got 23 assists this season. That's incredible. But if you look at the underlying numbers, his expected assists is just almost double Elyounoussi. As in, ignore how many assists you get, because that can be a matter of chance sometimes, and you're at the mercy of the person you give the ball to in the back of the net or not. Expected assist is a better indicator of quality of chance that you're creating. And the expected assist rate for Forrest is, as I say, it's significantly higher than Elyounoussi, and even more so than Sinclair. And this season I've also introduced the concept of a secondary assist, and this might be a step too far for some people who might be switching off at this point. But the secondary assist very simply is the pass before the pass that sets up the chance. So it's like a sort of, you've established the pass to give someone the opportunity to then create a chance. And again, Forrest leads the way on that. And Elyounoussi would be trailing behind on that, which suggests that Elyounoussi involvement in build-up play may not be as much as the other two. And I think Elyounoussi does put a lot of risk into his passing, and that's not a bad thing for a creative attacking player. Messi's passing completion rate is probably a bit lower than you might expect because he puts so much risk into his passing. He's trying to do the unexpected thing. He's trying to do the creative pass. If you think about, again, back to that Lazio game, Elyounoussi won the ball back by his high press. I mean, there was a moment when Forrest scored that illustrated that a little caption of a few seconds that perfectly illustrates the strength of Elyounoussi. He forced a turnover high up the park with a press. He then pulled off a pass to Forrest, which didn't look on at all. And the Lazio defender, I think, was surprised by it, and he caught slightly off, with a fraction of a second off, and missed the interception that he would normally have been expected to get. I don't think he was expecting Elyounoussi to attempt such an eye-of-the-needle pass. And that put Forrest in for the equaliser. And that summed up the two of the biggest sort of attributes that Elyounoussi has, that presence and physicality and ability to force mistakes in the opposition through high work rate and pressing, and then the ability to take chances in the passing. It's just that he doesn't do it that often. Unfortunately, his passing is about 10% worse than Sinclair's or Forrest in terms of accuracy. I say worse, as probably the wrong term to use. His completion rate is lower. I think he's a player which, when it comes off, it looks great, but more often than not, it's a bit like the Anthony Stokes thing. You just often have your whole head in your hand saying, why did you try that pass? It wasn't on. It's just a bad decision. Whereas I think Forrest is actually a tremendously good decision maker. Now that can look very boring sometimes, because if the right decision is to roll the ball backwards 5 yards, then Forrest will roll the ball backwards 5 yards, and he'll keep possession. But when he does try and set up chances, he does it, as I've said, with the expected assist stat. He does it very successfully. So I think very different types of players in that sense. Forrest tends to be safer and more precise, and only take on the pass when it's on. Whereas Elyounoussi takes more chances, but gives the ball away a lot more. But again, I'm just going to pick out one more stat quickly, which is passes into what I call the danger zone. So these are completed passes into the centre of the goal, essentially, which is a zone where you've got a much higher chance of scoring than anywhere else on the pitch. And again, Forrest completes nearly one of those a game, whereas Elyounoussi it's about 0.7. So again, Forrest is putting the ball into the danger area more successfully, more accurately than Elyounoussi on that one. But I would say Elyounoussi is performing better than Sinclair was last season. So in that sense, he is an uptick on Sinclair from a creativity perspective.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting because I do sometimes feel that James Forrest is underappreciated. And when you look at your stats, and it's not obviously the first time you've mentioned that, his performances are very, very impressive, aren't they, from an offensive perspective, particularly. Elyounoussi, I think, again, casual observer here, spectator, looking at him, it took him a wee while to get into and I think it was a fitness thing, Alan, to be honest with you. It took him a wee while to get to the level that you thought he was really performing well. I liked the character he showed against Livingston away when we were beaten 2-0. I think I probably gave him the man of the match that day. It's always a difficult one to get the AXOM contributors to give us a man of the match after a day like that. But I liked the character that he showed that day because it was a dreadful performance all in.
Yeah.
And then obviously the injury, I think then what happened was he was rushed back for the League Cup final, and he was so far off the pace that day. And it was on a day that we didn't play particularly well in any case. And going back to your previous stats, obviously without Forster it might have been a different, in fact it would have been a different outcome. And then I just felt again that he was coming back into it, and then this happened. So it's unlikely, because of the kind of the wage bracket that he's in and the kind of money that Southampton would be looking for, it's unlikely that we'll see this Elyounoussi, will see him in a run of 20 to 25 games. I think if we did, then he would really make an impact. I mean, what's your thoughts on that? It's been a stop-start one, so it is very difficult for you to make an assessment on whether or not we should either try and extend his loan deal or bring him in. I think bringing him in permanently is probably out of the question.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to just to sort of flesh out and build on that, is look at his kind of scoring, scoring threat as well, because his stats there are actually very, very interesting in that he has less shots than Forster Sinclair, less shots in the box, but he actually. His scoring rate in terms of goals per 90 minutes is higher than both of them.
Right.
But what I would caution, is that he's scored with 64% of his shots on target. Now, I'm sorry, but that's just not sustainable. That's just not going to be maintained over a long period. And this is a bit of a danger for a relatively small sample. So whereas Forrest is converting 31% of his shots on target, Sinclair was 35. Somewhere between 30 and 40 is pretty decent for an attacking midfielder. A striker might be creeping up into the 40s, probably at the elite level. So 64% on shot conversion is not going to be sustained. He's actually got the lowest shot accuracy. Only 33% of his shots hit the target, but when they do hit the target, they've got a damn good chance of going in. So I suspect he's had a bit of a good run, and I don't suspect it would be maintained, really. So a bit of a mixed bag on scoring with him. And I think, as I say, where he is unimpeachably better than Forrest or Sinclair, if I can leave him on a positive, is, as I say, his almost work without the ball. His possessions won, his challenges won. The times he wins the ball back in the final third, is much higher than the other two. But on the other hand, he loses possession more in the final third. He miscontrols the ball more often, and so forth. And I think that's just, again, because of that sort of high-risk way of playing. So I think, to your point, or to sum it all up, if he's a player that Celtic, again, could get for not too high a fee and was willing to take a wage within the structure, I think, at the age he is, like you say, 25, and given a good run, there's definitely a good player there and somebody that would be an asset to Celtic. But if it's going to be the type of money that it certainly seemed like it was going to be a few months ago before the world changed, and the wages are a stretch, then I suspect there's better value in the market. Would be my overall view, I think.
It's always interesting to speak to you, Alan, and to thrash out those numbers. We'll do it again. We'll do it on a regular basis over the coming weeks, and we'll keep it quite focused to the one or two players, or maybe one position, and we'll digest it that way now that we've not got any new figures or stats to work through. All right. But Alan, until next time, you keep yourself safe, and thank you very much for being once again on A Celtic State of Mind.